No phones.
Well, so talking about the city, I choose to speak about the city. It could be the police with S, as a place where people gather and make policy together. So there is a movement, actual movement, mobilization in France with a square occupation. It could be quite interesting to have a look about and to ask the question of the square when the people are in the square, how they can rebuild again this city as a police. And in France, this square occupation movement is called Nuit debout, so it's night standing. It's in Bulgarian, I don't know how really to translate it. But it's, yes, it's a fact to...
Игра на думи между будни, нощен и изправени, т.е. стоящ през нощта.
And so here the first pictures is about the Republic Square in Paris, and it's the main square occupation place in our capital city in France, where this mobilization have started. But we have invented nothing, by the way. And just to choose few previous examples, not so far in the time, we could see, for example, with Tahrir Commune in January 2011 in Egypt, that the square occupation movement is not something with a French copyright from this year, and it have an history. There is many examples more far in the time that I have chosen to take just any current examples to show that there is the rise of a new form, a new tool, a new practice, and we will speak about mediatization and the fact that it gives ideas, it spread around countries and in the world. So Tahrir Commune, you have, for example, Occupy Wall Street movement and Occupy America, so in America. And with the movement we have 99%, for example. You have in Spain, for example, the Indignados, or the 15 de Mayo mobilization, was really huge, by the way, and we create after that the political movement Podemos, and it was the 5th anniversary of that, and it's still continuing, not on the form of occupation, square occupation, but it's still continuing. You have Gezi Park in Istanbul, for example, in Turkey, and a movement was really highly repressed. You have Maidan in Ukraine, for example, and what is important, in fact, about all this square occupation, they don't have necessarily an ideological unity between Maidan, for example, or what happened in Spain, and etc. It's totally different kind of revendication, but it's a form, it's the same form, the same process, and I think I want to underline that they have the same foundations. The first one is the democratic gap, so it means that there is the connection, in fact, between the people and elites, the people and institutions, the people and the process, institutional process of making politics, or the lack of policy shared by the national, for example, community, shared by inhabitants, and etc. So this democratic gap is a main foundation. There is a simplicity of the notion of square occupation, the fact that people are in the street and they go together and they're gathering together on a square. There is a media impact because it's easy image, it's something who is visible, that people they stand and they can talk, and journalists can come and make an interview really easily, and it's occupation of the public spaces. So it's not like short time or like a demonstration, you just pass on the street. Here you are here to stay. And in fact, it's a form of mass movement, because if you occupy a square with 10 people, it shows that it will not have the image of Maidan, Gezi, or another example that I give. You need to have a mass mobilization, but it's a really easy form to make it visible, in fact. In France, nowadays, as I said, there is a social mobilization. In fact, to go to the origin of this current mobilization, we have to back in February. And in fact, our liberal capitalist government announced a massive change in labor law. So I will not go into too deep details, but our social model is based about, for example, public services, a certain form of the state, and etc. And in our history, the social mobilization, workers' movement, and etc. have built, with win or lose, our labor model, we will say. And the current law is trying to make a liberalization, flexibilization, with the standard of the European Commission and with the standards of the World Trade Organization, with in the opposite, in fact, of the spirit of this social model, and on the necessity of the daily life situation, in fact, for workers in private or in public sectors. This law was announced really quickly, and it was like announcement of the end of the French way to envisage, to imagine, and to live, in fact, the labor daily life. On the 9th of March, there was the first mobilization. We were grouping like all part of civil society in France, with a lot of people agreeing, because, for example, there is more than 70% of French people opposite to this law actually. On the 31st of March, there were 1.2 million of French people in the streets, so it's not the biggest demonstration, because in 2010, for example, there were 3 million of people against the pension law. And in fact, it's an important point, the important date, the foundation date, because at this moment, there was a will for a few group of people to promote the idea to square occupation. And in fact, in the night of this 31st of March, there were in Paris and in a few other cities the launch of Nuit debout. So you have no little map, it's not the best one, but we show that it's not a Paris phenomenon, it's a national phenomenon, and it means some point in the map, but it's a bigger place when happened, in fact, a Nuit debout phenomenon. And Nuit debout, it's not only against this law, it's against this law and its world. So by world, it's politician class, it's other law, it's austerity, etc., etc. And in fact, to link this slide with the previous one, it's really, it was really sensible that it became the center of mediatic attention during few weeks. And nowadays, today, it continues, in fact, to be something with importance in this mobilization. For the French case, but I think it could be quite the same, but not only with the French example, sure, or good ones, for the other countries. We could see the square occupation and link it with a few historical and symbolic, really deep example in history. Because in fact, the square occupation, you can, it seems, as, for example, the Greek Agora, or to the parliament. You have an image, for example, of Greek Agora, the Ecclesia making policy together, and etc. With a really symbolic, deep image in Western way of understanding political science. There is a French Revolution, for example, constitution of a secular republic, and etc., who in France is a really powerful reminds. And for example, here it's an image of the Paris Commune. So it's three totally different, in fact, historical moments. But you see that the assembly, people gathering and speaking about policy together, it's, we can say the democratic myth takes the form mainly of, in fact, the assembly. In fact, if we try to look at Nuit debout in a sociological point of view, we can name it as an interface in an atomized society. When I say atomized, there will be some shake, but I will speak about that. Because in fact, the current mobilization against this work law, labor law, and its world underlines a new step in the deconnection between French elites, French institutions, and French people's population, inhabitants. And so, in fact, it's underlined just the rise of the democratic gap. Because this law was not negotiated, for example, it was just imposed, announced in the medias, and the passion, there was the use of the 49.3 article of the Constitution with the law to impose, in fact, and not to take the vote from Parliament, but just to impose for the government and from the executive the law. It was used and it will be used in 1 or 2 weeks again. It underlines the disillusionment in an institutional New Deal. It makes there is no alternative sensible, there is not a New Deal who will come that people perceive and can trust in or opt to. The lack of involvement in classical tools for the people too. Because Nuit debout, it's not a classical tool. In France, we have classical tools as trade union, for example, who still exist, who were really more powerful before. Syndicats, trade union, and etc. And it underlines too that French society is quite fragmented. There is different social groups who don't have any interface in the normal situation and no space to meet or to make policy together. So in fact, these both elements, these both statements could help for us to understand why Nuit debout appears. It's a meeting point of these two different streams, and it appears because of these both conditions. But it's not mean that it's a place without contradiction, because if you don't have the habits together, if you don't have the habits to make policy together, there is a lot of different contradictions who appear, tensions. And in fact, from what we can see actually in France with this mobilization, there is different contradictions that I want to underline. On the social side, because it gathers really different people, like imagine the differences and the tension or the misunderstandings who can exist between people with a work who come on the square, or unemployed people, people who live in a flat or in a house, even just a little apartment or a big house, and people from urban ghetto in some cities, or homeless, for example. There is a different, totally different social reality. On the political side, between experienced activists who have a lot of information, experiment from other social mobilization, and etc., and people totally novice in politics. The weight of a YouTube activist in a lot of people, young people, because they have seen three videos on YouTube, you think that they have a political mind, like a new phenomenon. There is a tension in the practice or in the way of life too, because if you want to occupy a square during the day and during the night, it's a daily life tension who appears too. As for example, the difference between the people who have the will to sleep on the place, at the middle of the city, on tent or with minimum comfort, or for example, tension between the position of people about the use of the drugs. Because you are on the square, somebody will smoke weed, hashish, or what you want, and people around say, oh no. So you imagine, on this meeting point, it's not an idealistic point of view that we have to need. It's really kind of daily life example. There is cleavage between people, for example, promoting the non-violence like hippie style, or, and people saying that because nowadays there is a huge police repression in France, there is more 6 or 7 people who lose eyes because of police shoots. There is few people who are damaged and not in coma but close to, we will say, and there is 100 or even thousands of people injured, beaten by police sticks and etc. Tear gas, jail, to be in jail, to have the experiment of the jail, what is a jail, what is to stay in jail during 2 days without have done nothing. It's really a high social violence, in fact, symbolical violence too. So there is this cleavage. There is another cleavage which is really interesting between people coming in this square saying that Nuit Debout is an utopian experiment, or some other who think it's a struggle tool for this mobilization. But between these two worlds, sometimes it's a total misunderstanding. There is another cleavage about people thinking that the goal is to hold the camp, to stay here, to make a tent, to make installations. And people who think that they have to exit is maybe not the best term, but to move to the city. To move to the city, to go in another square, to make more demonstration, to be more open, in fact, to the city. So this point is linked with the other one. There is some people in Nuit Debout who think that Nuit Debout have to converge, to go with unions, trade unions, associations, other part of civil society. And there is people who think that Nuit Debout alone is sufficient. It's something other. There is a rejection of the other part of civil society. We are enough for ourselves. So it's a really interesting cleavage, by the way. And there is the last one, but not least, some who have an ephemeral vision of Nuit Debout, even as a struggle tool, even as utopian experiments. It will take a few weeks, we will stay here even 2 months, but it will end. And some with the vision of a permanent vocation, and to continue, and the life will change, and etc. So, time of meeting is a time of misunderstanding. And in fact, we have not to see this square occupation as something ideal. It's not ideal, it's not paradise, but more as a sandbox, in fact. It's a sandbox. People come and make some castle together. They are not agree about architecture of this castle, and they try some stuff, and etc. Sometimes in the joy and happiness, sometimes with a kind of big tension, you know. And there is different atmospheres, in fact, between the night, between the day, at each hour, because it's different people who come with all this social, political, practical contradiction, with all this cleavage. The main limitation of this movement, it's a really urban movement. And in fact, the majority of French population is not living in urban place. There is I think it's 55% of population living in a rural part. Rural not mean like the French village with peasant and etc. It means a place that you have your flat or your house, even if you go to work in the city. But it's not necessarily the majority of French population who live in a metropole or in big cities, in town. One of the limitations is the weight of Paris Republic Square in mediatic coverage. We are in centralized country from the point of view of institutions, for example, or power. Paris have really huge space, and we find this limitation, in fact, in the movement itself, because of the media. The fragmentation is still creating tension, as we said, so it's not like pop, you open a space and everything will manage, like self-management of the contradiction. No, it takes really time, and it's really a limitation, because for some you lose time, for some other you want to go faster, and etc. There is a porosity of this mobilization about apolitical or antisocial behavior, in fact, like complotism. So there are people coming and starting to speak and to take time in the General Assembly, for example, to speak about aliens, or this kind of stuff, you know, or even sometimes really more, how to say, difficult topic or ways, like complotism, but complotism sometimes like against the power of a secret organization and really shadow stuff.
Идеята за световната конспирация.
There is individualism, because you are printed with this society behavior in an individualist society. It's not because you try to make collective action that there is no individualist behavior who appears. And idealism, like you live in your dreams, in your image, but not with the reality, for example, of this new community that you try to make, in fact. And one of the limitations is the fact that there is attempts from the power, for example, from the state, or from other political parties, to try to recover the movement, to take for them, to say, yes, Nuit, it's because of our ideas that it arrived, or something like that. Or to try to divide it, using the cleavage, for example, and the first one is about violence, non-violence, and etc. And they try to divide, they try to break it. And the problem is we can see actually that it have a limited resilience. It's fragile. It's not something strong like we will resist, necessarily resist. Slavoj Zizek, I don't know if you know him, who is a philosopher from Slovenia, I think. He was during Occupy movement, he was active there, he was invited there to speak and etc. And he says something with, I think, really totally connected about the current situation in France. Do not fall in love with yourself. We spend a pleasant time here, but remember, carnivals are cheap. What matters is the day after, when we will take back our ordinary lives. Does something have changed? So, he was saying that in the Zuccotti Park to people there, but it's something we can question that could be asked to each kind of square occupation movement, in fact, or to each kind of popular, spontaneous movement, initiative, activity. Does something have changed? Because the carnival, in fact, it's to underline the fact that, yes, we have parties together, it's good, we gather, but what it will change? Have we made really policy? Have we changed something in our life and etc.? So we can ask, does Nuit debout is just a symbol and change nothing? It changed nothing. I don't think so, because that we can see is three different points. The first, it have a range in mediatic and practical affairs. It's a good auxiliary for the fight in this social mobilization against labor law and its world. But it's limited, and for example, trade union, actually there is a different strikes, sector on strikes. The oil production is on strikes, the nuclear station will be on strikes, the airports and planes will be on strikes, the trains are in strikes, etc., etc. So there is a lack of oil in oil station, for example, actually, it's really funny. And there is a demonstration, and etc., with the classical tools of the workers' movement or the social movement. And in fact, Nuit Debout is helping, is bringing new people, and etc. It's a good combination. But it's not enough Nuit Debout alone. The second, it's a Nuit Debout movement has already participated to politicize a large new group of citizens, inhabitants, young people, and etc. and spread and teach practices. As, for example, the practices of speech together, be in a general assembly, to learn that there is a big group inertia, that if you want to speak together with 2,000 people, you need some common rules, like time limitation. In fact, like what Etienne and Frank was saying about the well management of the discussion inside the group, but to a larger scale. But it's good practices that, for example, Nuit Debout is helping to spread, in fact, practices of democracy, minimal practices of democracy, how to speak together. And the third one, who is not the list two, is socialization and meetings. Because, in fact, it participates to fight locally in each city where they are, to fight against the social fragmentation. Because it's, as I was saying, an interfaces. And in fact, it contributes, and I have seen a lot of scenes really interesting, when you have, you know, the homeless drinking or eating with somebody who don't know nothing about this world, and the homeless not mean that he knows this world too, you know. Illusion about, yes, you have a work or you have a house, but you don't know necessarily what it means too. And just in fact to share life story, for example, to have a understanding of each other who is deeper than the, for example, mediatic representation that you have. People from the ghetto, if you see that on the television in France, you will have a lot of image. And you will be maybe afraid, or you will have a pre-notion. But when you meet, in fact, it's really interesting the pots that it can open. And to finish, and I will just show you a few pictures and comments, but just lightly. Pictures from Nuit Debout in Grenoble. So in Grenoble, I will. No. The other. Grenoble, it's here. You see? So it's quite far from Paris, but it's not.
It's on two borders with Switzerland and Italy.
So here, for example, it's one of the first nights of Nuit Debout in Grenoble. It's in front of a cultural building with named MCD, with opera, singing, and etc., stuff like that. It's not in the center of Grenoble, and it's between center and the periphery of the city, we will say. And that it was a picture during a film projection. It was projected in the front of this building, in fact. And it was a film Merci Patron. Thank you Patron. It's a satirical, critical film about a couple of French workers fired and unemployed by the first rich guy in France, and how they try to manage, in fact, to have their job back or their money back. And it was this movie was a symbol for this social movement too. Here it's a General Assembly. Each day there is at 6 o'clock the march of the building. The building is, in fact, the building is here, and there is stairs. There is a lot of, you see there is a kind of diversity. of people, etc. To be honest, this one was not bad day, quite good day about the number of people participating in the General Assembly. Sometimes there is less people, especially when there is rain, for example. But there is not only General Assembly. In General Assembly you decide, in fact, General Assembly, they take form of speeches. So you can speak, there is really different kind of speeches. Even sometimes drunken people coming and saying just something like, yeah, I'm angry, you know, about this life, etc. Some of the time more political intervention, it depends, it's a mix. There is some decision with try to consensus or with a vote, with a high hand. This decision, after that there is little commission, so it's more little groups who work with the goal, with the mandatement in fact of the General Assembly. So for example, I don't know what they are speaking, but maybe they are preparing the new poster to stick in the wall of the city to advertise about the next demonstration, or maybe they are speaking about the construction of the little garden just at the other side of the camp. There is a lot of different kind of activities. People, in fact, they come with their practice, with their knowledge, and they can ask something, and etc. With you know, kind of altermondialist mood, we will say, to change the world and etc. with practice. But some others are not in this kind of thinking. Yes. Here, it's to illustrate, for example, demonstration in Grenoble. And you can see a lot of trade union flags, for example, or the red flag, and of the communist youth, because it's a youth organization with important influence. With here it's bière solidaire, it's beer in solidarity or something like that. And for now in Grenoble, demonstrators were lucky because mainly it was in sunny day, so it's better to. Back to the camp, to the square. There is kind of training of building structures and etc. to make space for children and to have different kind of tests to make together. And it's interesting. There is a certain aestheticization too, with colors and etc. It's a will to make it. Here you have, for example, posters with the program of the day. Different hours, there is meet together, dinner together, General Assembly, and etc. It's a place to live too. It's not only a place to speak or to organize. Here it's the kitchen, in fact, and you can have a meal, you can take drinks, and etc. There is volunteers, who inscribe their name on the sheet of paper, and it turns not necessarily easily. Can create some problem. It's daily life problem, and it's the problem to organize something in collectivity is never easy. Nuit promotes some action in the city center. For example, you have heard about the Panama Papers affairs, so it's a corruption and whitening money problem, fiscal fraud. I don't know if the name this one is correct, but. Yes, it's Welcome to Paradise, Fiscal Paradise, Welcome to Paradise, in front of...
райски зони. Това, което съм ги наричам офшорните зони. Те ги наричат райски зони, тук има за игравка с добре дошли в рая.
So you see, it's people who participate to General Assembly. For some of them, it's the first time that they go in the city, that they go in action. And for example, this one, it's a demonstration in the night, just at the when the government used the 49.3 article of the Constitution. There were between 2,000 or 3,000 people. There were no plan, it was not announced. It was kind of, you send SMS, you send texto, and etc. We have to go in the street. And then we were on the street during 5 hours in the evening. Thank you.